I want to talk to you today about how I personally build lines for the Superspeedway races, Daytona, Talladega, for truck, Xfinity, and the Cup Series. Atlanta, it's still its own beast. That's just kind of why I don't include it there. But first and foremost, it is the month of February. NASCAR is back. If you want to support me, support Pearce, support the work that we do, support the live shows, support these videos, support everything that goes into the sheets, the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours that go into making the sheets look nice, easy to read. Just in general, consider joining the Patreon. I know it's $60, but look, that goes to us. We're not hosting a site. We're not sending that money out to different content creators or different articles and different things. You are directly supporting me, or you're supporting Pearce and I, okay? Consider joining and helping us out, and hopefully it'll win you some money. When we look at Daytona, let's talk about the Truck Series in general first. Let's talk about the Truck Series. So if you are part of the Patreon, you will have access to this and you can look through. And so, like, for example, we have this for all of the series, the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series, to where you can see the past optimals. And I do believe that this is a bit before when DraftKings started doing Truck Series, because I'm pretty sure that Angela Ruck was the first one. I feel like we've only had Truck Series the past like 3 or 4 years or something along those lines. Anyway, if you scroll all the way down, you will see the starting position and the amount of times that has been optimal. And we're just kind of gonna blow through these real fast, just so I can get to the main point of kind of how I build lines and stuff like that. But you can see specifically the Truck Series, and let's talk about Daytona first off, since we only go to these places. We only go to these places once. When we look at Daytona, these guys just like to tear stuff up. That's just how it is. Back-to-back years of nobody inside the top 19 being optimal. And you can see where these guys are finishing. Yeah, sure, you want the winner, but check out where these guys are starting. Like, it's the guys in the back. You know, same thing even at Talladega. Like, Talladega, despite the fact that, Ben Rhodes is optimal, starting 15th, finishing second last year when DiBenedetto won the race, like, we are taking out gigantic chunks of the field in the Truck Series, and you can see that by where all the green is. Like, really, the sweet spots. And you got to remember that this series, depending on what year you look back at, has only had 38, 36, 34 cars, 32 cars, things like that. So when we look back at this optimal distribution of the positions, you're seeing that it's literally the back half of the field, okay? That's just how it is. So in the Truck Series, and I'll show you examples of it, I stack from the back. I play the guys in the back. Now, I do that in general for every single series, but we're going to cover them all, and then I'll just kind of go through them some more. Let's go and look at the Xfinity Series as well. We have all the races here. You can look at all the optimals. You can see the... Now, I do want to add that on here, we do include Atlanta. For me, personally, I just believe Atlanta right now is its own animal. I like to look at that independently of Daytona and Talladega, just because we know for sure what we get at Daytona and Talladega. I think there's still a lot of variables up in the air for Atlanta, and just, I don't know. I'm a bit fishy about Atlanta, but in general, you can see how many times these have been optimal. And for the Xfinity Series, you will notice that yes, we have a gigantic amount in the back here, but we also have more people moving up towards, the center of the starting grid, heading up into the top 10. Now, when we compare that directly with the Truck Series, we see that the distribution inside, let's say the top 13, is very minimal, very small, okay? Now, in terms of the Xfinity Series, why is there so many optimal drivers starting here, specifically between 8th and 15th and stuff like that, compared to the Truck Series? Well, when we look back at who these drivers have been in these situations that have been optimal, because we got to remember that the Xfinity Series doesn't necessarily wreck at the same degree as the Truck Series, and they still tear stuff up. But we are going to look, and you will see that we have a lot of AJ Allmendinger. We have a lot of the colleague cars. We have a lot of Justin Haley's. Literally, colleague has been optimal so many times at Daytona and Talladega. It's unbelievable. Like, look, AJ Allmendinger starting 8th. Justin Haley starting 8th. Justin Haley starting 9th. AJ Allmendinger starting 1st. We have more. I know we have more AJ. That's him starting in the back. Ross Chastain, colleague, starting 4th, finishing 1st. That's another AJ Allmendinger in the back. AJ Allmendinger starting 11th, finishing 3rd. We have AJ Allmendinger starting 11th, finishing 2nd. Gregson starting 14th, finishing 8th. Like, these are cars that are going to be running up front. And I mentioned Colleague, and then I brought up Gragson there, but we're seeing that Colleague specifically are the guys who don't necessarily get the lead, because we see RCR, we see Junior Motorsports get the front row, get a lot of starting positions inside the top 5, but we see Colleague and the rest of the Junior Motorsports cars typically fell out anywhere between like 7th and 15th, specifically because of the Xfinity Series. It's very easy to separate the top half of the field in terms of speed from like Junior Motorsports, from the Colleague cars, from the Joe Gibbs Racing cars, like the RSS cars, the MBM cars, even like Our Motorsports and things like that. Like, they would always qualify in the back, and that's where you would get, a majority of your optimal line or optimal drivers for Xfinity being back here. But we see that the distribution is slightly increasing higher up compared to where the Truck Series was. For the Truck Series, we see a gigantic distribution. And sure, we see like 13th, 15th, and 16th, but we see a majority of the distribution between 20th on back, whereas the Xfinity Series, yes, it's still here in the back, but we also have a slight, distribution of guys up front, just because those are good teams starting up front. Specifically when Colleague was firing all cylinders, when you had AJ, when you had Justin Haley, and regardless if it was Landon Castle or Burton, whoever was that third Colleague car, all three of those cars would move up. Even in the days where it was Ross Chastain in that role as well, all three of those Colleague cars would typically work together and stay together for the entire event, and they would typically be starting in the situation here. So we see, just a distribution increase in here. When we look at the Cup Series, yet again, for me, Atlanta I'm very timid on using Atlanta right now, because when we start using these counts, now I'll talk about this over here in the next sheet that I have. But when we look at Atlanta, Chase Elliott and Ross Chastain were optimal from starting first and second. We're seeing that was the first ever time first place has ever been optimal. That was the second time that second place was ever optimal, and things like that. I like to look at Daytona and Talladega specifically. That's just where I'm at there. However, we're still going to see a distribution summarizing the same thing that we're seeing. Now, granted, we have a lot of stats here. I mean, we were going all the way back to 2015 with Martin Truex Jr. starting 42nd, finishing 7th. We just aren't counting that here since we have a 40-car field. But when we look at, if you look back at, if you've been watching us or if you've been watching me for several years, you remember when 41st, 42nd, and 43rd still counted on this here. We just took that away because we're dealing with 40-car field now. But we could see the distribution, yet again, stacked from the back is going to work out. Why is it, and I'm kind of going over this very quickly because I've done this same video at least like 6 years now, and I just say the same things. But why is, 22nd to 30th so green? Well, it's a situation where these are decent cars. I'm not saying that they're the greatest ones, but it's situations where it's a front row car. We saw it with Todd Gillen. We saw it with Anthony Alfredo. We would see, necessarily good cars there. Sometimes it'd be Cole Custer. I can't think of any other persons right now at the moment. But it would be cars that have decent speed, that are going to be quick, that are, they're slower than the faster cars, Joe Gibbs, Hendrick, and guys up front, but they're faster than like the Rick Ware cars and the Spire cars and everybody, filling out the back half of the field here. So this is your prime territory of where you want to try and target people. And you can see that highlighted. If we look at, the Daytona Fall Race last year was pretty, that was a big lull. But Austin Dillon, decent car in the 20s, like we can understand that happening, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, 28-27, 28-27. Like, yeah, of course, like these guys are going to be optimal, but they're good cars. They're good players in the back. Let me try and find a situation or example where it isn't necessarily like a standout guy. Anthony Alfredo, this is the one I think of the most. Anthony Alfredo starting 30th at Talladega. Nobody wants to play him. Nobody wants to play Eric Jones starting 30th and 26th respectively. Yet again, like in the prime real estate area for you having a chance to be optimal. Clint Boyer, Michael Waltrip. Yeah, actually, that's still Talladega. And these aren't even counting these guys. Let's look through. Ryan Preece, Justin Haley. Starting right in this range. Not necessarily a big name guy, Justin Haley and Ryan Newman, but like, come on, we can see them getting up there and we can see them racing. Anthony Alfredo again, starting 30th. Nobody wants to play him. Like there's a reason why this section has been so popular and stuff. Okay, and I think I am going to include Should I can put another video I did in the comment section years ago, but I mean, this is kind of just a summary of that anyway. Just trying to think, because like I said, I've made this same video about 6 years in a row now. When we look at these lineups outside of last year's events, these are all the optimals distributed in a way that I like to see it. Now, before last year's Daytona 500, the spring Talladega race, the summer Daytona race, and the Daytona fall race, I randomized everything else. The 22nd optimal lineups before that are all randomized, so they're not in order. Okay, and I forgot exactly what I highlighted these for. These are part of an old video. Highlighting something. I don't necessarily remember what I was highlighting, but let's kind of zoom out here. That is zooming in. Let's zoom out. Yeah, we can still view that. So these are the optimal positions, okay? We'll go back and do, sorry, I know I'm kind of blocking some of these. Other than Daytona fall race with the guy starting 6th being optimal, I'm going to scroll down. The races last year, highest scoring driver outside of this guy, and I'm just saying this so I can scroll up and not have my head or my camera block the screen. But outside of that, look at the optimal lineups back here. You know, this is starting from 12th on back. Where's the majority of the drivers coming from? And I highlighted 20th position because that's halfway through the field whenever we hear stack from the back half of the field. You can move that line wherever you want, whether you want it to be 23rd, whether you want it to be 18th. I just have it as 20th, and I just like playing I like playing the back half of the field. That's where I want to play, okay? But we can see the distribution of where these drivers are going and where the optimal lineups are going, okay? Like, yeah, sure, people want to argue, like, oh, don't stack from the back. People want to argue, like, oh, you know, like, you don't always want to stack from the back, but trust me, that leads to profit more times than none. Now, I do it for every single race. Last year, I don't think I made any money in the Cup Series race at Talladega. But, like, that's the risk you take. Like, I understand going in that stacking in the back and playing guys in the back aren't going to work for every single race. I just lean towards hoping that when it does work, it can cover me like it did last year in the summer race, or like it's done previously. Like last year in the summer race, I played quite a lot of money. But even if you're playing a smaller amount of money, like in a $10 like truck or Xfinity Series contest, if you do 10 lines in that and you just play guys from like 20, like seriously, truck series at Daytona, you do 10 lines with nothing but guys from 25th on back, I find it very difficult to believe that you don't make money in that race. Okay, it might not lead to being optimal, but in terms of free money out there, like I've always played guys from the back. You know, there's such an asphyxiation of trying to nail the optimal at a plate race to where it's absolutely impossible to determine what that will be before the event takes place. You know, if you land on it, that's awesome. But why would you risk throwing away free money when you could just absolutely play people that you know are going to get you there, that you know are going to end up cashing? That's playing the back half of the field. That's stacking from the back, you know. We'll hear it a lot, you know, entering Daytona and Talladega of like, oh, you want to stack from the back, but not really. And I'm like, no, I want to absolutely do nothing but stack from the back, and I do it for every single race. Now, of course, like in situations like this, I'm not going to win money. I'd bet a lot of money if this was the Talladega race. Same thing here. These are just races I'm not going to win money on. I'm not going to win money here. You know, depending on what type of race this is, I probably won't win money. But I lean towards I want races like we had in the fall race. Not necessarily where NASCAR makes a mistake and they race in rain, but where a majority of the field wrecks, you know. I build for this type of race. I build for this type of race. I build for this type of race. Even when we start, and this is just this is just Cup Series optimal lineups. But I lean to this type of race, you know. We have several races throughout the year, and all it takes, and specifically leaning towards the fact that we have less practice now, not only for the Cup Series, but just in general. A lot of these drivers are losing opportunities to get more comfortable, to get more familiar with what the car is going to do in traffic. You know, the teams get less and less time to understand what a change is going to do in the air of a pack, you know. So, like, for me, I just view a lot of things leading towards a lot of people wrecking, a lot of not even people just being stupid, but all it takes is just guys wrecking for the lead to take out the field. And that's typically when we look at the Cup Series, and I did this several years ago, or maybe it was last year, I don't remember. But I looked at where the crashes happen for the Cup Series specifically. And we typically see, yes, we're going to have the standard midfield crash. But when we get to the end of the race, they are wrecking. Like the second place, third place, and fourth place driver are wrecking due to a block that the leader causes, or due to a block that somebody, first car, second lane outside causes or something. And it accordions back to like third, fourth, and fifth, seventh, sixth with them wrecking, So like, I lean towards the view that we're going to have more and more incidents and more people and more drivers kind of racing stupid, causing wrecks and causing incidents and things like that. Let me go ahead and pull up just example of how I did lineups last year, and so I can show you. So these are in no specific order. I'm just going to go through them by the way they ended up being pulled up. I always track my lineups and stuff. I got to remember. I just remember Talladega being just a terrible track for me last year. We didn't really get much of anything. Typically we've had like 2 rain shortened races. Most of the time they just don't end up wrecking at Talladega and stuff. But I still build the same way, and you can see the amount of money that I leave over. It's well over 10 grand on nearly every line. But typically I like the 20 max, specifically super speedways and stuff. And I'm building. I mean, I play ownership, and I play people that. And we could talk about that on a race-by-race more basis, and you've already heard me talk about that if you've known me forever and stuff. But this is so this is, I think, was this the Jeffrey Earnhardt 3 car? I don't remember. This may have been where everybody wanted to own him, and I just said I don't want to own him, and I pray to God that he wrecks, and he didn't. But really, this stuff is just an ownership play. I think this was the first Talladega race. Let me look. This was the percentage I had when I did 60 lines. I still finished with like 20. You could see that with Xfinity, I do slightly push it up a little bit depending on how I think the race, or just depending on the weekend and stuff. You can see I did 20 lines, just playing guys in the back. That's how I want to play. This is Xfinity at Daytona early in the season. Yet again, just playing guys in the back, hoping they wreck and stuff. I forgot what these highlighted, what I had to change, or typically these are things that I'm having to change and stuff. Actually, this one here, okay, we'll come back to Daytona 2, because I forgot these were, I just X'd out of it, hold on. I'll come back to that. At Daytona 1 earlier in the year, I typically kind of track a line, or I track lines throughout the race. So if they have a red, because Drew Dollar would wreck again. You're like back-to-back races. It was nuts. Jeremy Clements got involved in a wreck on the back straightaway early in that event. But you can just see, like, that's how I distribute lines. And so typically, it's usually around like a $300 investment just on plate races in general, which I guess is just like that in general. Like if you do a 20 max, you do 20 lines in 10, 20 lines in the 4, 20 lines in the 1, you're right at 300 there. If you want to do any more, whether it be a mini max or whatever, throw those 20 lines in there. So typically, like, I still play aggressive, but with the Superspeedway races, I almost always make sure I can do the exact same 20 on the smaller contest that comes out, whether it be a smaller $10 contest, smaller $15 contest, whatever the case is. So typically, I will normally have right around like $400 to $500 on the plate races and stuff. Yet again, Truck Series at Daytona, you can see sometimes I track my ownership, sometimes I don't. It really just depends on how I'm feeling the day of or the night of before I'm doing it. Typically with trucks, I don't have a lot of time, so I'm kind of running through stuff really fast. You can just see how I build lines and how I distribute, just how I distribute, the amount of money. Like this lineup has $200 left over. This lineup has $15,600 left over. This is the $500 last year, or the $500 last year. I just did 12 lines in here because I think it was a $25 entry fee. Probably do either the same or a little bit more this year because $25 gets expensive really fucking fast. But same thing here. I remember I made money on this race. I didn't win, the $1 million, but I was very proud that I cashed and made money in the first ever Millionaire Maker and stuff. When we get to the Cup Series at Talladega, I built the same way, praying people wreck. I mean, look, I put my money where my mouth is. Like, a lot of people want to bitch and moan about, like, stacking from the back is bad or, like, it doesn't work and stuff. But I'm perfectly fine with doing this race in, race out, And then the Cup Series race Daytona in the fall. I even had a FanDuel pool as well. That's how I knew I'm going crazy, because I'm starting to like track FanDuel lines. You're going to pay attention. You're going to see this line in a second. We just stack from the back every time. We pray to Christ. We do this for 2 reasons. Very shortly, is that I'm trying to play people that'll specifically either be there at the end, who can gain positions, or who won't be necessarily racing for the lead when these idiots decide to wreck. I talked about this in the video where I was analyzing Superspeedway drivers with I forgot if I call it a film study or whatever. But I go through and talk about certain drivers and how they normally perform late in a race and things like that. But this was the race where we end up having that, huge wreck due to rain. We made quite a lot of money. Same thing here. Let me see if I can find those results real fast. Yeah, so last year during that summer Daytona weekend, this is the Xfinity Series race, which was the last laps I just showed you, and this was the playoff cutoff race when it rained and everything. What a fantastic weekend. Got extremely lucky and stuff. But you can see that I play the same type of lines year in, year out, race in, race out, just hoping for a situation where they wreck. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is not in a sense of like, oh, look what I won and everything. However, my process, at least, and you can see the distribution of lineups. And yeah, granted, I was a fast lap away from what separated. I finished second in the $10 20K to first Xfinity Series race at Daytona, and what separated me and the winner was 1 fast lap. That was all that separated us between this one. But the same type of process, the same type of approach, And yes, I mean, I got extremely lucky with having finishes like this. However, my approach has always been the same. My game theory at these races have always been the same. And I understand that, look, we don't have wrecks. I have plenty of screenshots, or let me change that. I have plenty of races. I don't have screenshots of it, but I have plenty of races at Talladega to where I've put in, 300, 400, 500, whatever the case may be. I don't make anything because they don't wreck. They don't spin out or anything. So anyway, I build lineups like this. I always will. I don't see myself changing. If people want to make articles and videos and stuff being like, you want to stack from the back, but not really, like, okay, that's fine, but I don't see why you would ever approach a plate race outside of stacking people from the back. I just don't understand. I don't get it. Thank you guys very much for watching this, listening to this, and if you want to support me, support Pearce and everything like that, feel free to join the Patreon. Thank you very much for being here, and I am happy to be back. I'm happy to be covering NASCAR again. So I'm looking forward to all the live shows and all the videos this year. So I'll see you guys then, and let's enjoy Speed Week. Man, I wish it was Speed Weeks again, but oh well. I'll see you guys later.